Well, for more insights on the ongoing global chip shortage, let's bring in Peter Siciu. He's a freelance writer, Forbes contributor, and a journalist for the National Interest. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me tonight.
So get us up to speed. How did this semiconductor shortage begin in the first place?
Well, when the pandemic broke out, we saw that in addition to factories being shuttered, there were supply chain issues that then were exacerbated by the fact that we just can't ship everything. As your previous segment noted, we've got cargo ships that can't unload products, and this is sort of happening worldwide. We're also seeing now with the wave of the Delta variant in Malaysia, Vietnam, the Philippines, we're seeing production delays, and it's not just at the factories that are producing the chips, it's also the factories that are cutting and packaging those semiconductors, and this is creating bottlenecks in the entire supply chain.
So with such interconnected economies and supply chains, obviously this becomes a global issue. Which countries and sectors are the hardest hit?
Well, right now the chip shortage is projected to lead to a $210 billion loss for the auto industry this year, and industry producers have tried to address that by pledging an estimated $75 billion to shore up the long-term supply chain deficiencies. But I don't think this problem is going to go away anytime soon because, again, we count on these semiconductors to be used in literally everything from TVs to cars to our smartphones. There just is not enough supply to go around right now.
So obviously a lot of people looking for solutions then. What will it take for them to catch up, and why has this been such a difficult issue to resolve?
Well, one of the main issues is the fact that a lot of the companies are in direct competition with each other. So there's been a lack of transparency. So we don't know how much company A is making versus company B. The supplies, like I said, cannot meet up with the demand. The orders are there, and until some of the supply issues are resolved, and then the transportation issues. So it's a multi-level problem without an easy solution. I know that today at the White House, the president said it was top of mind, but it seems like the president has a lot of issues top of mind. I don't know if this current administration is up to the task of solving this issue with everything else they have on the plate.
And I'm sure people really did take these chips for granted, you know, as we turn on our phones or start our cars. So in terms of production itself, talk about the speed or lack thereof when it comes to how these things are actually made.
Well, they're made in factories around the world. It's a relatively simple device. It's not that complicated, but again, it's a matter of supply. The components. The components come from different factories, everything from the sand that has to be supplied for the chips to the different processors. All of these come from different factories. They're put together. And as the Delta variant has spread, it's shuttering factories, and that's just going to make the supply issue even worse.
And as we saw, as you mentioned, some manufacturers had to pause production like GM. Others are rethinking their strategies amid the shortage. Talk about this sort of knock-on effect for businesses and, of course, consumers.
Well, as we've heard, now is not the time to want to buy a new car. All of our automobiles use more and more chips, and that problem was growing before the pandemic started. We have chips in everything from as our homes become smart, they all need these semiconductors. So again, it's in our gaming devices, it's in our laptops, it's in our cars, it's in everything. So as I said, the issue was there before the pandemic, and the fact that the pandemic has disrupted the supply chain and the global shipping, it was a house of cards waiting to collapse, and we got a big wind that blew it down.
So then with this meeting with the Biden administration, what, if anything, can Congress or American companies, what could or should they be doing at this point?
Well, at this point, I don't know if there's a lot the government can do. They could ask for more transparency among manufacturers to make sure that one company isn't hoarding some of the raw materials or the technology or the components that go into the supplies, into the semiconductors. So again, you know, the greater transparency would help. We need to pull together the same way the world needs to pull together to beat the virus. We need to pull together to make sure that the semiconductor shortage can be addressed.
So given this wake-up call, as you mentioned, that was already brewing even before the pandemic, what do you think this might mean for the outlook for investment in chip manufacturing?
I'm not an investment analyst, but I would be leery in the short term, but I think in the longer term, there could definitely be some profit opportunities.
And in terms of the long-term impact, if this does become a prolonged issue, which obviously it has been so far, what sort of economic knock-on effects could we be looking at?
Well, like I said, the chip shortage could mean a $210 billion loss for the auto industry. We're going to see that trickling into other industries. I think we're going to see any kind of toys that require electronics. They're going to be in real hot demand this Christmas. So we've been seeing those analysts say, if there's a toy your kid wants for Christmas, as soon as you see it, regardless of the price, you better buy it because it's not going to be available if it requires any chips later this year. I think we're going to see this with televisions, with computers. I think in the new year, it could be higher prices for consumer electronics, continued higher prices for automobiles, and I think it's going to be well into next fall before the supply chain is able to catch up with the demand.
Well, thank you as always for your insights. Peter Siciu there, freelance writer, Forbes contributor, and a journalist for the National Interest.